Thank you, Derek, and thanks very much for the invitation to speak once again. I was up all night a couple of years ago with what I thought was a kidney stone, and I spent the day in my emergency department having a number of tests. About 5 o'clock, I was phoned by the radiologist to tell me the result of the MRI scan, which I'd had for no other reason than it happened to be free at the time I was in the department. So he said, well, do you want the good news or the bad news? And I said, I'll start with the good. And he said, well, the good news is you're not a malingerer. The bad news is you've got a spinal tumour. Well, you can imagine that my next quality improvement was to do with communication skills, predominantly amongst our radiologists, but perhaps more generally. Anyway, it's all good. I'm here. And the benign schwannoma was taken out a few weeks later. Probably unnecessarily, to be honest with you. But it does bring me to my first slide, which is to form a framework for the talk today. This is not new. I want to start at the middle, work our way out, using this golden circle. The first question is why? This is my knee. I had an arthroscopy after a training accident. It was probably unnecessary. I had a bit of a nip and tuck. So my second probably unnecessary operation. So why you? I think it's important when you're starting out on a quality improvement initiative to identify what your skin in the game is. Why are you doing it? Why has it got to be you who does it? Why is it the members of your team who are doing it? And I'm quite heavily invested in this Choosing Wisely campaign, which is looking at overdiagnosis, overuse of testing and that sort of thing. You might say, why this? Why this particular subject? It could be because we are injuring patients through medication errors. It could be because we're failing to pick up deterioration in patients' clinical condition while they lie in our hospital beds. But again, you've only got to experience a few patients who have had this sort of incident to know that this is a necessary QI, probably at national scale. Now, I don't think that really anything or all of what I have to say today has got to be on this sort of scale, although predominantly QI initiatives I've been involved in have been large scale. I hope to just take out a few ideas that I think could apply to any QI initiatives that you might be involved in. I would say it sometimes helps to have a nice slogan or a nice theme behind it. And of all the ones that I've been involved in fact, probably all the ones I've seen, this fits the bill best, particularly in the Australian context. Why now? Why do we have to deal with this problem now? Sometimes we don't have the luxury of time. We have to act immediately. And this is another clinical incident which happened in Sydney just a year or so ago, where the wrong tubes were connected to the oxygen. So why it is very important. Why you? Why this particular problem? Why now? What about the how? So as a leader of quality improvement initiatives, you have to get things off the ground. You have to create space. Don't think for a second that you can fit this in, or particularly your members of the team can fit this in with their day jobs. You're all very busy. Find the time, and that usually means finding the funding. Form a team. That preferably form a network, because you're going to need that when you move on to the next stage, which is presumably going to be spread of your innovation throughout the organization. You're going to require a team that's got a mix of skills. You might have to develop those skills. You might have to select on the basis of a diverse range of skills. You're going to have some passionate people. You're going to have some people with links to the top of the organization, because one of the key things about sustainability of an improvement is that executive buy-in. You're going to require the cooperation of the people involved in whatever it is that you're trying to change. You're going to need people who have got influence within those groups. And you may have to have people outside of your organization if the aim is to spread it to other organizations, because there's nothing worse than having somebody else's solution imposed on you. Although we're told there is wisdom in crowds. You have to be aware of two things: groupthink and the belief that we can do it all ourselves. I've been in a number of groups which have got increasingly separated from the on-the-ground team that they're trying to influence, if you like. They believe they're doing the right thing, but the channels of communication have broken down. They're off on a tangent, and it takes quite a lot to reorientate people again. You can pick a methodology, really any methodology. You can choose Six Sigma, Lean, Theory of Constraints, but the one that you're probably most familiar with through the Clark is the Model for Improvement. I don't think it really matters. I think what does matter, though, is that you try to stick to it. I've seen a number of projects fail because they have literally lost the plot. They have failed to sort of stick with the methodology, and they have tried to make shortcuts. And they have lost the team, and they have lost the people. The model for improvement, as I say, is only one possibility, and George Box, a statistician, talking about modeling in a statistical sense, made the observation that all models are wrong, but some are useful, and this is no exception. I'm not going to labor this particular slide because I know that you're all familiar with it. But it is important to recognize that this is not a one-off cycle. This is an iterative process that has to be repeated not just through the development of the change that you propose to settle on, but also during the period of spread and development of changes elsewhere. I think increasingly we're becoming aware of the distinction between work as imagined and work as done. It's very messy medicine, and it often takes a lot of thought and planning, if you like, business process redesign, to identify exactly what is going on. So time invested in that planning stage is worthwhile. It requires not just people with technical expertise, it requires people on the ground who have got experience of the particular problems that you're trying to solve. And I'm sure that that's obvious to you all. It seems that no quality improvement project these days is complete without a hackathon. I don't know if you have them over here, but we've got a rash of them in WA at the moment. Hackathons are great because you get these incredibly smart, techie people coming in and devoting a weekend's time for free once. Because it's not a model that sustains particularly well. After a period of time, people do get a little bit fed up giving up their time for free. But we have had some successes, and this would be one with respect to antibiotic prescribing. You have to simplify the complex, and as Don Berwick said, if you can't change something big, then change something small. You're not going to get rewarded for planning, you're going to get rewarded for doing, so you might as well get on. Don't fix things. If you try to improve what's already there, you might miss the opportunity for true innovation. I'm sure Derek and I spent many an hour during our internship or house officer job peering into an abdomen as a surgeon laboriously went through a highly selective vagotomy, which was a great improvement on a selective vagotomy, which in turn was a great improvement on a truncal vagotomy. It was an improvement in the sense that it didn't make the patient's life completely miserable anymore, but it certainly didn't fix the problem, and it required an innovative train of thought, actually from one of the physicians in Perth, where I come from, to identify Helicobacter as the cause of the ulcers. Again, Derek and I probably spent a bit of time dodging behavioural sciences students, sort of preferring to get stuck into the more hardcore elements of our medical curriculum. I might even have been away kayaking during those lectures. But now people are being given Nobel Prizes for it. And I think everybody in this room now, including Derek and I, recognise how important it is if you want to change behaviour, because ultimately that's what all of quality improvement is about. We can make use of the new understanding of behavioural economics. We can look at the choices people make. We can manipulate and I say that in a guarded way, the defaults that we present to them. We don't restrict choice, but we can help people to make better choices. And there are many examples of this in the medical literature, which have had mixed impacts when it comes to actual the literature on the subject. And this is taken from a review from the Health Foundation. But you can see that the quality of the evidence in favour of these different behavioural interventions is mixed, but in some cases there's clear evidence that not only is it effective, but it's very relevant to the healthcare situation, and it's been proven to work in certain circumstances. When you're on your project, I think you can anticipate resistance, so you might as well get used to it. Usually that comes not because of a clear vision of where you want to be, but because of the uncertainty associated with the journey getting there. And I make the point here to illuminate the journey, to make it clear what the next steps are to the extent that that's possible, and to help people get there. Usually there's not much argument about where you want to be, but you have to let go of the safety ropes in order to get there sometimes. The types of resistance you get might be passive, the yes but no but sort of response, or it might be overtly resistant, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it's going to happen, and you're going to have to overcome these hurdles, and you're going to have to use the expertise of the people in the room to help you to do that. I think it's a mistake to try and motivate people, to try and G them up. But it's sensible to work out what actually motivates them. See if you can reorganize the project in a way that works to their advantage. And you might need a combination of the carrot and stick. And I found these are particularly useful. You don't get points for planning, you get points for doing. And I think one of the things that I've certainly seen put forward is that you should reward people's behavior towards the goal. It doesn't matter if they fail. Failure is not making mistakes, it's failing to learn from them. So you've got to encourage people to take risks in the full knowledge that some things will pay off and others won't. But provided you can stick to the methodology, provided that you can stick to the iterative PDSA type cycles, you'll work your way around these barriers and you'll begin to make progress again. Now, there are, I'm told, 3 types of people: those who can count and those who can't. And if you're in the latter group, then it's just possible that you might need a statistician to help you with the next phase, which is the measurement for improvement. It needs to be relatively simple. It needs to be graded to the endeavour that you're engaged in. But the important thing is that you need to have just enough information to make a decision, and you need it in a timely manner so that you can move the project forward. Probably the run chart is the simplest one, which you'll all be familiar with. You can get more sophisticated time series and all that sort of thing. And one of the great advantages about being part of this Clark is that you do have access to great statistical advice and a range of tools, some of which Derek has touched on earlier on. So I would suggest that you avail yourself of that expertise. You can get more sophisticated. In Australia, we've developed these VLADs, which are sort of cumulative sum statistical process control charts, if you want to get technical about it. But essentially, they're a level of sophistication up over the run charts, which allow you to tell whether you're making progress. The problem about these is they're not very timely. They take a lot of time to produce. So if you're involved in a rapid turnaround cycle, these are completely inappropriate. And similarly, funnel plots aren't particularly useful for changes over time, and certainly not on small projects, but I'm now talking about large-scale projects, because if you have a large period that you're investigating, it can take 5-10 years for that to come within range, even if there's a significant improvement. So you have to look at novel ways to handle these funnel plots in order to get the most out of them. But you've got to be careful. There are 2 things to worry about. One is unintended consequences. So although you might have your eye on the main prize, which is what you're focusing on, what you want to change, something could be happening over here as a direct consequence of that. If you're measuring the time it takes for people with hip fractures to get to theatre, that might look absolutely hunky-dory, but it's at the expense of the young person with the appendicitis who's languishing, I should say, in the ward for an extra couple of days. So it's sometimes necessary to measure outside the particular area of focus. And of course, we've all experienced these sort of dashboards. I think Tableau has got a lot to answer for. It's great software, but my goodness, people can go completely overboard with it. So remember, just enough and just in time. So I want to just conclude there and invite some questions. I think I encourage you to get stuck into whatever project it is you're doing. I'd encourage you to get involved with the team here and use the expertise that they have to offer. I'd suggest that it's very important to celebrate success. And Melody Siska, who is also on the Executive Advisory Board but can't be here today, said, you know, it's not a disaster to have a few premature pizza parties on the way. So thank you very much indeed.